Hello, I want to talk about writing a CD review. There are many journals that publish CD reviews and, in fact, that are looking for authors to write CD reviews. CD reviews is a great way to get into publishing because they're not too difficult to do and they don't require a huge amount of time. Of course, they don't count as much as, let's say, a scholarly article. In fact, they count very little, but it is a good way to get into scholarly work and also bridge scholarly work and actual music, performance, recorded work. Anyways, I want to go through an example from the South Central Music Bulletin, which is an open access journal. The website is scmb.us, scmb.us. South Central Music Bulletin. It's a refereed open access journal. Open access means it's freely available on the internet. I happen to be the editor, so I'm very familiar with this. So I will use examples from it. Um, and if you ever write a CD review and would like to publish it and don't have a journal to publish it, send it to me. And of course, it will be reviewed and possibly we'll have some suggestions for corrections. And most of them end up to being published. Anyways, this one is a little bit older, but this is one of my former students who wrote it. This is an excellent review. Anyways, reviews can say in their title that this is a review of a CD, or they can have a more general or very descriptive title. In this case, um, I believe uh, this review comes under the header reviews. Nowadays, we actually have the category CD reviews versus book reviews. So we have two separate categories on that. And I personally prefer the more descriptive titles, not just to say a CD review of Timothy Woolsey plays whatever, um, but a title like Timothy Woolsey plays Kennan, Reapy, White, Michelle, O'Quinn, and Welcher. Uh, so then the author's name and contact information, since this is an online journal, we always print email addresses of the authors. Then comes the bibliographic information of the item being reviewed. And after that comes the actual review. So now it depends on how many tracks a CD has, but you want to review it as comprehensively as possible. That means every track is possible, unless they're very short tracks, and there are too many of them to discuss them all. On this particular CD, there is a limited number of pieces of music. They're all 20th century pieces of music, modern composers, and so this is a limited number of tracks, so all the pieces are actually discussed on in this review. But anyways, the beginning paragraph should give some general information. So it reads, although the CD is without title, it just lists the composer names on the CD cover. It is an excellent collection of contemporary piano music by Texas composers. So okay, there we have it. It is a collection of contemporary piano music by Texas composers. That's really what it is. Now then it says excellent, and excellent is a judgment. A review will have components of judgments, positive or negative. Now, with negative judgments, one needs to be really careful because you would have to justify your um, negative judgments, and so you have to be really, really careful with that and give good justifications. Most of the reviews are rather positive, and their goal is to make the reader who has not listened to the CD aware of this CD or album. It can be an online album nowadays, doesn't actually have to be a physical CD anymore. Um, so give some, basically inform the reader about this and give some information that is relatively general that the reader can use to decide whether or not to get this album, or to to get hold of this album and to listen to it, right? um, and of course positive judgments will help, but they also have to be justified, or at least implied. So, anyways, all of the works on the album are performed by Timothy Woolsey, who is professor of piano at Southwest Texas State University, and whose career has been increasingly active nationally as well as internationally. So, here's this one performer who performs all the pieces on the CD, is mentioned, giving some background um, about this performer. Now, this background information may or may not be on the CD cover or in the booklet accompanying the CD, uh, which in the online CDs sometimes we have too, um, where you can get liner notes on iTunes, for examples, but sometimes they're not available. So this information may or may not be available, but a good review needs to include background information about the author or composer, or in this case performer. And so we can simply uh, Google information if we write this, and find information about the performer, and then insert it here as background information. Now, not separated, but like integrated into sentences. His performances are characterized by the clarity, balance, and solid tone. So there's a characterization, and there are also positive judgments at the same time. Second introductory kind of paragraph. The CD offers 64 minutes of music that borders on atonality, with several different approaches of harmonic color. Therefore, I found this record most enjoyable. Here's another judgment. The CD serves as a good introduction to the composer's individual styles. So it gives more background information. It says how long it is in total, and what musical style. So there's a little bit of analytical information here, obviously derived orally from listening to the CD. Okay, then it goes into the specific tracks or pieces of music. So the Austin composer Kent Cannon, born 1913, it's always good to give background information. Now, he has since passed away, but at the publication of this review, he was still alive. So the birth year is given for all the composers. Uh, so it's represented by the work retrospectives. It is an eclectic collection of 12 pieces written between 1938 and 1951 that have been revised and linked together through melodic motives. So again, there is some analytical information that is derived orally by listening to it. Um, these pieces vary greatly in energy level and mood, yet fit together naturally. Retrospective alone makes this album worth listening to. So this is a fantastic piece of music, and there is a very nice positive judgment here given. Now, uh, next, the philosopher's path. Oh, I wanted to point one thing out that I had forgotten in the bibliographic information. There's this sick here, which refers to, it's written in brackets, and it means there is a mistake here, a typo. But this is the bibliographic information. This is the title, how it is printed on the CD. And this means there is some typo here. The last name is misspelled, Riepe. It's Riepe. But on the CD cover, it's actually misspelled, and you have to spell it how it's on the CD cover. Um, but of course, in the review, the composer name must be spelled correctly. So we, as the writer of the review, cannot just um, uh, continue with the misspelling. Anyway, so the Philosopher's Path was specifically composed for Timothy Woolsey by Russell Riepe, born 1945. Riepe, who is professor of composition at Southwest Texas State University and also well known for founding the Texas Mysterium for Modern Music, composed this piece in 1991. Its continuous three movements are very colorful and filled with imagery. So now maybe there is some information about this in the liner notes, but very well this is derived orally by the author of the review. It is relatively abstract, but the liner notes help to clarify the meaning of the work. And so if you do take information from the liner notes that is not general information, that means not information you can easily get elsewhere or easily identify, then you need to, of course, reference your work. Most journals do not allow footnotes for extra explanations or references, so you have to build your reference into your review. So you reference the liner notes here. Now, if the liner notes are written by somebody else, if there is a name printed, of course you need to include that name. Sometimes the liner notes in a collection like this, I would assume the liner notes or the information about each piece is written by the composer and then submitted to the CD company, which assembles it together as liner notes. But if there are no author names mentioned, and you don't have to mention one, but you have to say, here is information from the liner notes. And this is brilliantly formulated. The liner notes help to clarify the meaning of the work. So the first movement, Rock Garden, is based on the dialogue between two philosophers as they debate the relationship between a 700-year-old rock garden in Kyoto and the universe. Of course, you would not figure this out by listening to this piece of music. This is background information that the composer related to, right? And that is written in the liner notes. So the thrilling second movement, The Way of the Warrior, requires the pianist to use the inner piece of the piano, soundboard, and strings. Now, this again may or may not be in the liner notes, but we can listen to it, we can hear it, and you can write about it in the review. To illustrate the story of the samurai master Shoyu Ronin, who was challenged to a match. In combat, the master is able to defeat his challengers using a fan rather than a sword. Barrages of string and soundboard sounds are used to create the stunning effects. Now, stunning is a judgment, a positive judgment. There's again some analytical information that is derived orally by the author of the review when listening. Although this excellent composition, again judgment, received a clear and flawless performance, that's a judgment for the performer, by pianist Timothy Woolsey. Unfortunately, a recording production decision seems to break the continuity of the album. Following this piece, there's an excessive 13 seconds of silence. So if there is a technical problem or any kind of problem, it needs to be mentioned. Now, anybody who we would care less about the 13 seconds if we're happy about the music, but in a review, it really is necessary in such a case to mention that. Okay, next track. And you could even refer to the next track is, or this piece has three movements, so it's on three tracks, or all three movements are in one track, which would be unusual, but things like that, technical information, is quite useful to the reader. Anyways, I just made those examples, but let's go back to the review. David Ashley Wyatt, born 1944, director of the University of Houston's Moore School of Music, is known as the composer of sacred, as a composer of sacred as well as secular music. So this is background information. Probably may have been given in the liner notes or may not have been. Maybe just internet information Googled. So we need to hunt for more background information and just integrate it into some of the sentences. So on this CD here represents 5 glimpses for piano, and here are the years of composition. This short suite is composed of glimpses ranging in length between 36 and 65 seconds. Most notable are his rhythmic explorations in march and burlesque, which may remind the listener of Bela Bartok. Compared to Bartok, however, White's composition is more lyrical in nature, especially during the more modal glimpses, Night Song, Canticle, and Elegy. So here that reference to Bela Bartok is probably what the author of this review thought. It's probably not written in liner notes, although if it is, you can use that as well. But then probably reference liner notes again. Anyways, next, Timothy Woolsey shines judgment in form of a verb, shines in the performance of 5 Preludes from 1991 by Catherine Michel, born in 1940. Now, here's actually one thing that I want to point out. The CD actually does not list the year of birth by this composer. She's a woman composer. And women often do not like to give away their age. But I remember, because I remember talking to Ryan Davis when he wrote this review, that we really need to include the year of birth here if it is public record. And so we searched online and we found it somewhere and we included it here. Why? Because we included the years of birth for all other composers mentioned on the CD. And in fact, for music, it is quite important to know whether a composer is born in 1940 or 1970 or in 1990. So that's important information, because it's a generational issue and so relates to the style of music as well. Anyways, Michel's compositional work includes over 100 piano pieces, but also pieces for dance, theater, and orchestra. Her preludes, moderato, and allegro vivace are debatably the most technically difficult pieces on this album. This is quite important. Now, this is all piano music, and pianists might be really interested in this CD. And so, if so, they need information like that. Now, it happens that the author of this review, Ryan Davis, is also a pianist, so he's very familiar with these issues. If you review a CD where you're not so familiar with the technical issues because you don't play a certain instrument, then maybe don't mention it, or ask somebody who knows, if you want to make a statement like that. So mainly due to the leaping melodic lines and unrelenting tempos. So also some analytical information, which really is good for our imagination of the music, because the reader of this review has not heard the music yet, in most of the cases at least. The performances of these beautiful pieces are very exciting. Beautiful is also judgment, right? Particularly interesting are Homage to Prokofiev and the Andante Rubato. Okay, it does not say why these two are interesting. It could be useful to know why, but it's interesting. Okay, next, the youngest composer represented on the CD is Wayne O'Quinn, born 1979, a former student of Russell Rippey and Timothy Woolsey. O'Quinn is currently studying composition at the Juilliard School, unfortunately misspelled, and the editor of this journal didn't catch that mistake at that time, unfortunately, but that's how it is, and we have the policy, once it's published, we don't change it unless it's something huge or major or offending or something like this. This is an unfortunate typo. Anyways, at the Juilliard School with Milton Babbitt. O'Quinn's composition Nightfall, composed in 1999, is the most recent on the album. This haunting work displays a fantastic array of harmonic color as it floats through tonal areas, so there is more analytical information derived orally. The sonorities and textures of this work are most interesting. So there is what is interesting in this particular piece. Dan Welcher, born 1948, has composed pieces in a wide variety of mediums, including opera, symphony, wind ensemble, and so on. Welch is also known for his appearances as a guest conductor, so there's more background information here that is probably taken from other public records like websites, internet pages. So Welcher brings a sense of humor to this collection with two of his compositions. The Digital Watch from High Tech Etudes and there's a quote, and that quote comes from the liner notes. And whenever you quote from the liner notes, now earlier the reviewer took some information from liner notes, but they weren't used word by word, so they weren't in quotation marks, but still referenced. Here, there it's word by word, and they're in quotation mark, and then it says the reference in parentheses, liner notes, comma, page 4. So again, if there is an author for the liner notes, you need to name the author. Welcher uses the effect of strummed piano strings to illustrate the setting of the time and the watch alarm. Yet the watch has its own agenda, and its uncontrollable alarm is represented by a set of screaming rolled chords in the high register of the piano. So probably something that the reviewer identified orally when listening. The setting of this piece is ideal with its mechanically metronomic 12-note bass. It's quite important. Okay, there's a 12-tone piece, or at least partially 12 tone or 12 note. Welcher's second piece on the CD, Pachel's Bells, is an excellent variation on Canon D by Johann Pachelbel. Welcher explains the inspiration for this work, and there is another quote from the liner notes. I won't read this with the proper reference and page number. Pachel's Bells was written as a birthday present for Spillman. Pachelbel's classic has been transformed into a fascinating collage of bell tones, chimes, and carillons, which Woolsey masterfully recreates. So there is a nice judgment for the pianist, for the performer of the CD. And the last paragraph needs to bring everything together and tie everything up. This CD is an elegant display of aural colors. Elegant is a judgment, is judgmental word, positive judgment, of aural colors, much like the cover photo of Colorful Folds of Fabric suggests. So there's a reference to the cover photo. Now, in some journals, the covers are actually reprinted with the CD review. In this journal, we don't. So it is very useful to, either way, it's good to somehow refer to it, to mention it, to describe it. And usually there's a lot of thought going into choosing a cover photo for an album. The 28 tracks, okay, again, reminds us there are 28 tracks of original music, or 28 tracks, there are fewer pieces, but there are 28 tracks, so this is might be useful information, by composers who have shaped contemporary art music in Texas, are recommendable to anyone with an interest in modern music, piano literature, or even the study of Texas music. And so there is a reference here to the potential audience of this, so who might be interested, and it's always good to include this. So it gives a lot of information of what is on the CD, what the music is like, how the performance is done, whether it's good or bad. In this case, it's a very positive CD, and yeah, I think it's a very nice review that gives the reader the information she or he needs to know, to decide, I want to get the CD, or I want to listen to this, or no, this is not for me. I'd rather spend my time otherwise. So, anyways, I hope this was helpful. I hope you will write a CD review or write many CD reviews. Google CD reviews, read others, look in this journal or other journals, and write your own and start publishing. So, bye.